The towering trees stretched endlessly in every direction, their dark silhouettes forming an unbroken wall around the lost child. The forest was alive yet eerily still, with whispering leaves rustling in the wind and distant hoots of unseen creatures echoing through the vast emptiness. The sun had begun its slow descent, casting long, creeping shadows that slithered between the gnarled roots and jagged rocks. Somewhere in the heart of this wilderness, a child stood trembling, their tiny frame dwarfed by the sheer enormity of the world around them. Panic tightened its grip around their chest. The realization hit like a crashing wave. There was no path, no sign of home, no comforting voice calling their name. Just an endless sea of trees and the deafening silence of being truly, utterly alone. It had all happened so fast. One moment, the child had been laughing, chasing butterflies along the forest's edge while their family set up camp. The next, a misstep had sent them tumbling down a small embankment, scraping their knees on the rough earth. Dazed but unhurt, they had scrambled to their feet, expecting to see the familiar sight of their parents just a few steps away. But instead, they were met with nothing, only towering trees stretching as far as the eye could see. At first, they had called out, their voice small against the vastness of the woods, "Mom? Dad?" But their cries were swallowed by the thick air, vanishing before they could travel far. The wind whistled through the trees, whispering secrets only the forest understood. A sinking feeling settled in the child's stomach. They had wandered too far. They were lost. Tears welled in their wide, frightened eyes, but they refused to let them fall. Crying wouldn't help. Instead, they turned in frantic circles, searching for any sign of a trail, a footprint, anything that could lead them back. But every tree looked the same, their twisted trunks and knotted branches forming an endless maze. The sun, once warm and golden, now seemed distant, its light fading with each passing second. The child took a cautious step forward, then another, their feet crunching against fallen leaves. The further they walked, the more the air thickened with an eerie stillness. Each breath felt heavier, each sound sharper. The chirping birds had gone silent. Even the rustling of leaves seemed to have paused, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Their heartbeat thundered in their ears. Every nerve in their body screamed for them to run. But where? There was no direction, no clear way out. The weight of fear pressed down on them, sinking into their bones. Then in the distance, something shifted. A low, barely audible sound, a rustle, a snap of a twig. The child froze. The silence had been broken, but not by them. Someone or something was out there. The child's breath hitched. Every muscle in their small body tensed as their ears strained to catch the sound again. The forest had been eerily silent just moments ago, but now something was moving. The rustling was faint at first, like leaves shifting in the breeze. But then came a sharp crack, a snapping twig underfoot. Fear surged through them. Their legs trembled, every instinct screaming for them to run. But run where? They were lost, surrounded by endless trees and darkness creeping in with the setting sun. The thought of moving blindly in any direction terrified them even more. The sound came again, closer this time. A shuffling, deliberate, heavy. The kind of movement that did not belong to a small animal or the harmless flutter of birds. Something much larger lurked in the thick undergrowth, hidden behind the twisted trunks of towering trees. The child's breath quickened. Their hands clenched into fists, nails digging into their palms. They turned slowly, scanning the dense woodland. Shadows stretched long across the forest floor, distorting every shape, twisting reality into something monstrous. The trees, once a source of wonder and adventure, now loomed like silent sentinels watching their every move. Then the wind shifted, carrying with it a new sound, a low, deep exhale, a breath, not theirs. The child's heart pounded. They weren't alone. Eyes wide with terror, they took an uncertain step backward. A branch snapped beneath their foot, and the sudden noise sent a flock of birds screeching into the sky. Panic flared in their chest. If something had been watching them before, it definitely knew where they were now. Their mind raced. Was it an animal? A person? Their father searching for them? The thought flickered in their mind, but deep down, they knew. This presence didn't feel safe. A shadow moved between the trees, slow, deliberate. It was too far away to see clearly, but the shape was massive, nearly blending into the darkness. Another breath, deep and rumbling, filled the silence. Then more movement, more than one. The child's stomach churned as realization settled over them. There was more than one of them. Their tiny fingers dug into the bark of a nearby tree as they tried to steady themselves. Every instinct screamed at them to run, but their legs refused to move. Fear had rooted them to the spot. The heavy shuffling grew louder, the undergrowth rustling as unseen bodies moved through it. Then a low guttural sound, almost like a growl, but not quite. It was deeper, stranger, vibrating through the very air around them. Tears pricked the corners of their eyes. The child was trapped, alone in the wilderness, surrounded by something they could not see, something massive and unknowable. Then finally the figures stepped into view. The moment stretched, frozen in time. The child's breath hitched as the dark figures stepped into the fading light, their massive forms pushing through the thick undergrowth. First, one pair of glowing eyes appeared, then another, and another. The ground seemed to tremble beneath the weight of their slow, deliberate steps. Bears, not just one, but a group, at least 4 of them, loomed in the twilight, their powerful bodies covered in thick, dark fur. Their breath came in deep, heavy exhales, misting slightly in the cool evening air. Their presence swallowed the space around the child, making the already vast forest feel impossibly small. The child stood motionless, every part of them screaming to run, but their body refused to obey. Their small frame was no match for these towering creatures, each one easily weighing hundreds of pounds. Running was useless. There was nowhere to go. One of the bears, a massive one, larger than the rest, took a step forward, its deep-set eyes locked onto the child, unblinking. The child's tiny hands clenched into fists, heart hammering so loudly they were sure the bears could hear it. The others followed, their movements slow, calculated. Their massive paws crushed leaves and twigs beneath them, their heavy limbs shifting with effortless power. Yet they didn't charge. They didn't growl or bare their teeth. They only watched. The child swallowed hard. Everything they had ever learned about bears rushed through their mind. Play dead, climb a tree, stay still. But none of it seemed to apply here. The situation felt too strange, too unreal. One bear let out a low, rumbling sound deep in its chest. Not a growl, not a snarl, something different. It rumbled through the air like distant thunder, vibrating in the child's bones. The others responded in kind, exchanging glances as if silently communicating. The child's knees nearly buckled. This was it. Any moment now, the bears would lunge, their powerful claws and crushing jaws ending everything in an instant. But they didn't. Instead, the largest bear took another step closer, its nose twitching as it sniffed the air between them. Then, shockingly, it did something the child never expected. It sat down. The massive beast folded its powerful legs beneath its body, its great head still watching the child with those dark, knowing eyes. One by one, the others followed, settling into the forest floor like enormous guardians, forming a silent circle. The child blinked, hardly daring to believe what they were seeing. The bears weren't attacking. They weren't driving them away. They were staying. The weight of the moment pressed against the child's chest. Confusion swirled with fear. Why weren't they leaving? Why had they surrounded them like this? They were trapped, but not in the way they had imagined. The bears weren't predators closing in on prey. They were something else entirely. But what? The child stood frozen, trapped in a moment that felt too surreal to be real. The bears had settled into a circle around them, their massive forms rising and falling with each slow breath. The forest, once filled with eerie whispers and rustling leaves, had fallen into absolute silence. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Fear still gripped the child's heart, but something strange was happening. The longer they stood there, the less threatening the bears seemed. There was no aggression in their eyes, no signs of immediate danger. They were watching, observing, but not attacking. The child's legs trembled, exhaustion and terror weighing them down. They were completely at the mercy of these creatures, surrounded with no clear way out. Running was not an option. Any sudden movement might change the bear's behavior in an instant, but staying felt just as impossible. The largest bear lifted its head slightly, nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air again. The child swallowed hard. Every part of them expected a sudden lunge, the snap of powerful jaws, the crushing force of massive paws. But instead, the bear remained still, its deep eyes locked onto them with something that almost resembled curiosity. Another bear shifted slightly, its enormous body stirring the leaves beneath it. The sound sent a jolt of panic through the child, but still, the bears did not move aggressively. They were simply there, watching. A new fear settled into the child's chest. What if they weren't being hunted? What if they were being tested? The thought sent a shiver down their spine. These weren't ordinary animals acting on instinct alone. They were waiting for something. The minutes stretched endlessly. The child dared not breathe too loudly, afraid of breaking whatever strange balance was keeping them unharmed. The air felt thick with tension, each second crawling by like an eternity. Then, as if sensing the child's growing distress, the largest bear did something unexpected. It let out a low rumbling noise. Not a growl, not a snarl, but a deep, vibrating hum. It echoed through the stillness, a sound so strange that the child had no idea how to react. It wasn't threatening, it wasn't aggressive. If anything, it almost sounded reassuring. The child's heartbeat pounded against their ribs, but for the first time since the encounter began, the fear shifted into something different: uncertainty, confusion, a question they couldn't even begin to answer. The other bears responded with soft, guttural sounds of their own, almost as if they were speaking in some silent, ancient language only they could understand. The child remained frozen, struggling to make sense of what was happening. The standoff continued, neither side making a move. It was a moment suspended in time, a fragile balance between fear and something unknown. The bears could strike at any second, yet they chose not to. Then slowly, impossibly, one of the bears rose onto its feet. The child flinched, bracing for the worst. But instead of aggression, the bear took a single step forward, its massive frame towering over them. It exhaled softly, nostrils flaring as it took in the child's scent. The silence deepened. Then with a slow, deliberate motion, the bear extended its head and nudged the child, gently. It was the smallest touch, yet it sent a shockwave of emotions through the child's trembling body. It was not an attack. It was not a warning. It was something entirely different. And in that moment, the child understood one thing. Whatever was happening was no accident. The child barely dared to breathe. The touch of the bear's damp nose against their arm sent a shiver down their spine. It had been gentle, impossibly so, as if the massive creature was trying to reassure them rather than harm them. The sheer size of the animal should have been terrifying, yet there was something strangely calm about the moment. The other bears remained in their places, watching intently. Their dark eyes held no malice, no hunger. They weren't predators circling prey. They were waiting. But for what? The child's mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. They had heard stories before about animals acting in unexpected ways, about strange encounters between humans and the wild. But this was different. This wasn't just an unusual meeting. It felt deliberate. The large bear let out a low, guttural sound again, its breath warm against the cool evening air. It was unlike any growl the child had ever heard. It lacked aggression, sounding more like a deep vibration, a hum of acknowledgement. The child swallowed hard. It almost felt as if the bear was trying to communicate. The smaller bears shifted slightly, their heavy bodies rustling the leaves beneath them. One of them, a younger-looking one, leaned forward and sniffed at the child's legs. The child flinched but held their ground, their body trembling with the effort. Then another unexpected moment. The younger bear, smaller than the others, but still massive compared to the child, lowered its head and nudged their shoulder. Not roughly, not aggressively, gently, as if testing their reaction. The child's heart pounded. Was this a game to them? A ritual? A test? For a brief moment, an image flashed through their mind of a mother bear tending to her cub, nudging it along, guiding it through the forest. The bears weren't treating them like prey. They were treating them like one of their own. A strange, overwhelming emotion swelled in the child's chest. It wasn't just relief. It was something deeper. They weren't being attacked. They were being acknowledged. But why? The child took a shaky step back, expecting some kind of reaction. The bears did not lunge. They did not growl. They simply watched, their great heads tilting slightly. Then the largest one, clearly the leader of the group, turned its massive body and took a step in the opposite direction. It stopped, glanced back over its shoulder, and huffed. Then it took another step, and another. The child remained frozen, unsure of what to do. The other bears followed, moving in the same direction, slow and purposeful. The leader took several steps, then stopped again, looking back. The realization hit the child like a crashing wave. The bears weren't leaving them behind. They were leading them somewhere. The child's breath came in short gasps. Every rational part of their brain screamed that following a group of wild bears was madness. But then again, everything about the situation defied logic. The bears had not harmed them. If anything, they had shown them a strange, impossible kindness. For the first time since getting lost, the child had a choice. Stay here, alone in the darkening woods, with no idea how to find their way back. Or follow the bears, the same creatures they had feared moments ago, into the unknown. The largest bear let out another low sound, almost impatient this time. It turned and continued forward. The child hesitated for only a second longer. Then, with a deep breath, they took their first step forward, following the bears into the heart of the wilderness. The first few steps felt impossible. The child's feet felt heavy, their bodies still trembling with the weight of everything that had happened. And yet they moved. Slowly, hesitantly, they followed the bears deeper into the forest, the towering creatures shifting effortlessly through the thick undergrowth. The leader moved steadily, setting the pace, its massive paws silent against the damp earth. The others followed close behind, their forms blending into the dimming light. The child, small and vulnerable, trailed at the edge of the group, barely able to keep up. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction. Tall trees stood like ancient guardians, their branches weaving a dense canopy overhead. The fading sunlight barely reached the ground now, swallowed by thick foliage. Shadows grew longer, stretching across the forest floor, like fingers reaching for something unseen. Despite the darkness creeping in, the child felt an odd sense of security. Every so often, the largest bear would glance back, its dark eyes meeting theirs for a brief moment before continuing forward. It was as if the beast was making sure they were still there, still following. The child's breathing slowed, their heartbeat steadying just enough for them to take in what was happening. They were walking alongside a group of wild bears, creatures capable of tearing them apart in seconds, and yet they felt no immediate danger. The bears showed no aggression, no hostility. The only sound was the rhythmic crunch of leaves beneath heavy paws. The stillness of the forest had returned, but it no longer felt menacing. It felt different, as if the woods themselves had shifted, their presence acknowledged by something older, something unknowable. Minutes passed, then longer. Time became meaningless in the vastness of the wilderness. The child's legs ached, exhaustion creeping in, but they didn't dare stop. Then the bears suddenly halted. The child almost stumbled, barely catching themselves. Their breath hitched as they looked around, trying to understand why the group had stopped. The leader stood still, its great head lifted slightly, sniffing the air. The others remained motionless, waiting. A sudden rustling in the distance sent a jolt of fear through the child's body. Had something else found them? Another animal? A predator? But the bears did not react with fear. Instead, the leader let out a low, rumbling sound. Not a warning, but something more controlled. The others seemed to understand, shifting slightly but not moving away. The child's pulse quickened. Then, without warning, the leader turned sharply and began moving again, this time with more purpose. The others followed instantly. The child hesitated for only a second before quickening their steps to keep up. The trees grew denser, the air cooler. The terrain changed subtly, the ground sloping downward, leading them into a part of the forest the child had never seen before. The earth was softer here, covered in thick moss. The scent of damp wood and fresh pine filled the air. Then through the gaps in the trees, something new appeared, a clearing. The child's eyes widened as they stepped forward, their breath catching in their throat. The space ahead was unlike anything they had expected. Nestled between towering trees was a sheltered area, partially enclosed by large rocks and thick vegetation. A small, shallow stream trickled through the center, its water glistening even in the dim light. The ground was layered with thick moss, soft and inviting. It was a safe place. The realization struck hard. The bears had led them here, not just deeper into the wilderness, but somewhere protected, somewhere where the dangers of the forest didn't feel as overwhelming. The largest bear moved first, stepping toward the stream and lowering its massive head to drink. The others followed, settling into the clearing as if it were a familiar resting place. The child remained standing, unsure of what to do. Their legs ached, their body begged for rest, but their minds still struggled to accept what was happening. Then, as if sensing their hesitation, the largest bear turned and looked at them once more. Its dark eyes held something indescribable, something ancient, something knowing. And in that moment, the child understood. They had been led here for a reason. The child stood motionless, their wide eyes taking in the strange sanctuary around them. The dense trees created a natural barrier, enclosing the area in an eerie sense of calm. The steady trickle of the stream filled the silence, the sound blending with the slow, rhythmic breathing of the bears. The child's legs wobbled, exhaustion threatening to pull them down. Their body was drained, fear and confusion weighing on them like a heavy blanket. But something else was growing, an understanding, an unspoken realization. The bears had brought them here not by chance, but by choice. The largest bear moved with effortless grace, lowering itself onto the mossy ground. The others followed, settling in as if this were a place of comfort, a refuge deep within the forest. The child hesitated. Was this a resting place? A territory? A trap? Their heart pounded, but instinct told them they were no longer in immediate danger. If the bears had wanted to hurt them, they would have done so long ago. Instead, they had guided them here, away from the dangers of the unknown, into a place that felt untouched by time. The child slowly lowered themselves onto the ground, too weak to stand any longer. The softness of the moss cushioned their aching body, offering a small measure of relief. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, crisp yet soothing. For the first time since they had become lost, they allowed themselves to breathe. Deep, steady breaths. Their fingers trembled as they pressed into the cool earth, grounding themselves in reality. The bears made no move toward them, nor did they keep their distance. They remained close but not suffocating, their great bodies relaxed, their heads resting on their massive paws. It was as if they had accepted the child's presence among them. The night deepened, the sky above darkening to a deep navy, speckled with distant stars. The child's eyelids grew heavy. Their minds still screamed with questions, but their body could fight exhaustion no longer. Somewhere in the back of their mind, a voice whispered that sleeping near wild animals was madness, that this moment defied all logic. But that voice was fading, drowned out by the overwhelming need for rest. A single thought lingered as they drifted into sleep. Perhaps the wild was not always cruel. Perhaps in its vast and untamed mystery, there were moments of kindness. And perhaps, just perhaps, they were not alone in the way they had first feared. The night passed in a strange, dreamlike state. The child drifted in and out of sleep, the sounds of the forest blending into an unfamiliar lullaby. The occasional rustling of leaves, the distant calls of nocturnal creatures, and the deep, steady breathing of the bears created a rhythm that felt oddly reassuring. When the first light of dawn crept through the dense canopy, the child stirred. Their body ached from exhaustion, but their fear had dulled into something else, something closer to awe. The bears were still there, unmoving but alert. They had stayed through the night, their presence constant, unwavering. Then a new sound broke the stillness. Distant voices, faint but growing louder. The crunch of hurried footsteps against fallen leaves. The child's heart leapt in their chest. Could it be? The bears lifted their heads, their ears twitching toward the noise. The leader, the largest of them all, sniffed the air before letting out a deep exhale. The others stirred but did not flee. They simply watched. The voices grew clearer now, frantic and desperate. "Emma! Emma, can you hear us?" The child gasped. That was their mother's voice. Tears welled in their eyes as they struggled to their feet. They wanted to run, to scream, but their body was still sluggish from exhaustion. Instead, they stumbled forward, their voice hoarse but desperate. "I'm here!" Branches snapped as figures burst through the undergrowth. A group of people, rescuers, their parents, strangers with flashlights and worried expressions, came into view. Relief flooded their mother's face, her hands trembling as she rushed forward. But just as quickly as relief came, it twisted into something else: terror. Because behind their child, towering and unmoving, stood the bears. A sharp gasp rippled through the search party. Weapons were drawn, hands gripped sticks and tools, bodies tensed as fear ignited in their eyes. "Stay back!" someone shouted. "Don't move!" The child turned, their gaze flicking between the two groups. The air was thick with tension. The bears had not moved. They did not growl, did not charge. They simply watched, their great bodies still as stone. The largest bear exhaled once more, deep and slow, before turning its massive body away. One by one, the others followed, disappearing into the trees without a sound. Within seconds, they were gone, swallowed by the vastness of the forest. The child's mother fell to her knees, pulling them into a tight embrace, sobs racking her body. The rescuers rushed forward, checking for injuries, peppering them with questions. But the child barely heard any of it. Their eyes were still fixed on the spot where the bears had stood, the weight of the moment sinking in. No one would ever believe what had just happened. The child buried their face into their mother's shoulder, feeling the warmth of her embrace, the safety of home after a night spent in the unknown. Her arms trembled as she held them, as if she feared they might disappear again. The murmurs of the search party filled the air, their voices mixing with the rustling leaves. But nothing felt real yet. A hand rested on the child's back, their father's voice thick with emotion. "We thought we lost you." His grip tightened, like he was afraid to let go. The search team spoke hurriedly, some still casting wary glances toward the trees where the bears had disappeared. "We need to get them checked," one man said. "Make sure there are no injuries." A woman knelt beside the child, scanning them over with concerned eyes. "Are you hurt? Did the bears attack you?" Her voice was gentle, but underneath it, there was disbelief. The child shook their head slowly, still too dazed to fully explain. "No, they helped me." A silence fell over the group. The wind whispered through the trees, the forest stretching out around them as if listening to the words. The adults exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of confusion and doubt. "Helped you?" someone repeated. It didn't make sense. The idea was absurd. Wild bears did not help lost children. They were dangerous, unpredictable, and yet the child's face held no fear, no trauma, only wonder. The child looked toward the trees one last time, searching for any sign of the creatures that had stayed by their side. But the bears were gone, melted into the wilderness like ghosts of the forest. The search leader cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Let's get them back. They've been through enough." The group moved quickly, leading the child back through the trees, retracing the path that had once seemed so endless and terrifying. But as they walked, the child couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The forest no longer felt like a place of danger. It felt like something else entirely, a place of mystery, of something beyond human understanding. By the time they reached camp, the world had shifted back into familiarity. The flashing lights of vehicles, the soft murmurs of rescue workers, the warmth of blankets wrapped around their shoulders. It all should have been comforting. And yet, the child felt something missing. Later, as the sun climbed higher in the sky and the questions began to pour in, the child tried to explain what had happened. They spoke of the fear, the strange moment of silence before the bears emerged, the way they had surrounded but never harmed them, how the largest one had nudged them, guided them, led them to safety. Some listened with skepticism, exchanging knowing looks, whispering theories among themselves. Others listened with wide eyes, captivated by the impossibility of it all. But no one truly understood. The child's mother ran her fingers through their hair, her voice soft but uncertain. "Are you sure you weren't just lucky?" The child hesitated, their small hands gripping the edge of the blanket draped over their shoulders. How could they explain? How could they put into words the feeling of something deeper than luck, deeper than coincidence? Because in their heart they knew the bears had protected them. The reason why would remain a mystery, one that no one would ever be able to answer. But as they sat there, wrapped in warmth and safety, they glanced toward the trees one last time, whispering a silent thank you to the wild. Because somehow in the vast unknown of the wilderness, they had found something they never expected. Not fear, not danger, but kindness. If this story left you amazed, imagine the countless other mysteries nature holds. The world is full of extraordinary encounters that challenge what we believe is possible. If you enjoyed this tale and want more gripping stories like it, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. There's so much more to explore, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Stay curious, stay adventurous, and we'll see you in the next one.